Hi, this is Sporty King, and welcome to the 7 C's of Control. This is an excerpt from a presentation I created in 2000 called Presenting with Charisma. Speakers, trainers, educators, entrepreneurs, parents who may participate in a career day or address a graduation. It's for everyone to understand that our appeal to and impact on our audience is directly related to the physical and verbal mechanics we use. Specific mechanics empower you to speak with more confidence and skill. You can uncover those subliminal techniques and the conscious need to be in control of your audience and of yourself. Here are 7 C's that you can also download from my website, sportyking.com, along with some cheat sheet tips that'll help you plan to be in control. C number 1, connect. It takes 5 to 7 seconds for your audience to pass judgment, 30 seconds for them to decide whether or not they're going to pay attention. Open with facts and figures about your background that say you should be the one that's speaking. Nervous? Well, you start out with 100% support. Think about it. Even the person who says, "Oh my God, this better be good," that's their way of wanting you to succeed. Everybody wants you to be successful, and everybody wants you to be good. Write your own introduction and read what someone else wrote when you have the chance to introduce. Cheat sheet tips. Part of your preparation is finding out who's introducing you, to remind him or her to stress or emphasize something that has meaning to the audience in terms of news, recent events, how long you've been involved with a certain organization or a cause. And when you're the MC or introducing someone else, ask them what they'd like you to stress. Don't get up there and decide this is your 15 seconds of fame and that you're going to just alter how they should be introduced. Now, if you happen to know the person, have a personal relationship, or have had a great conversation with them, ask them if you can add a certain thing. But make sure that you stress that the most important thing that they want said about themselves, because it probably will walk them into the presentation and connect to a point that they're going to make later on in the presentation. Second C, create. Use visual handouts. Images and colors speak louder than words. See, I have a calming blue shirt on for my C's. And by the way, I do hope you caught that the 7 C's should remind you of what the oceans are around the world. See, when I give this presentation, I usually have the ocean in the background of my slides. I also use what I call the rule of 6. On my slides, 6 lines of copy, 6 bullet points, with no more than 6 words on each line. It's so important to paint your words and take your audience on a trip. Here's some segues, tips for your cheat sheet, some segues for connecting with your audience. 1. Instead of saying next slide, say, consider this next slide. As you'll see from the next slide, you'll see as we continue. This becomes more clear as we move forward. Think about that last point while you're considering this. And finally, let's see how that affects the bottom line. So those are some segue tips instead of saying next slide, please. Meanwhile, next C is contact. Speak with rather than talk to your audience. See, your eye contact builds credibility. You always have at least one, what I call a beacon of light. That person in the audience that's right there with you. They're shaking their head. They may be smiling. Or they must be just maybe looking pensive about, wow, I really get that. And you don't know where that person is seated. Center, left, right, back, forward. You don't know where that person is. You may have more than one beacon of light. But that's the person that you use to recharge your energy. When you feel like your energy is kind of zapping, just look at that person and make sure you're keeping in touch with your beacon of light. What I try to do also is after my speaking engagement, especially if my beacon is close by or happens to come near, I stop them and I explain the beacon of light philosophy of mine and thank them for having been my beacon and let them know how much their energy and support has meant to me. It just took them up another notch and made me their beacon of light as well. But it's so important to contact is also about getting some rest and getting in touch with your spirit. So here's your cheat sheet tip. What's your favorite meal the night before you speak? What is your favorite thing to do before going to bed? What type of music do you like to hear? I remember once I was in a speech contest and I had this tune in my head that I had been hearing for the past month. And it was a music, it was a violin song, and I just kept humming that song to myself as I walked into the competition, and it became my theme song, and of course I won the speech contest in that situation. But the key is, get in touch with yourself. I took that pressure off of myself about being in a competition and really talked about how much more important it was to compete with myself. I think that's another thing you have to think about in terms of connecting. Is connect with yourself. I compete with myself to be better than I was the last time. I don't compete against anyone. I compete with myself. Okay, that's another C. See, once you start with the C's, then a lot of them come up. So let's go to the third C, to the fourth C, by the way, which is contrast. And that's about vocal variety. Vocal variety keeps your message interesting. Now that doesn't just mean that you change the volume in your voice. It's also about the speed that you talk at, the pace, the tone. All of that becomes your vocal variety. And when you're using contrast, you want to also use your whole stage or your speaking area. Yet be conscious of what I call walking with purpose rather than moving back and forth. Walking with purpose means you step into your message. When you have certain key points, you want to take 3 or 4 steps and step into that message and stop. Subliminally, what you're saying is, I stand on my words. And just like I just did, there's the contrast. I pause because this is a key point that I want to just dream and settle into the audience's psyche. So contrast is very important. Also, give yourself stage directions to control your weaknesses. Here's a cheat sheet tip for that. You can say to yourself, I'll need to be sure to address the people sitting blank if you happen to know that your eye contact doesn't, if you notice that you've always looked to the left, you want to tell yourself to look to the right. I'll slow down when I talk about to really drive the point home. Maybe I'll even repeat, I need to be sure to make better eye contact, to pace myself. The last time I spoke to this type of audience, now that I've gotten better at, they'll get more out of my presentation. See how all of those fill in the blanks will make you a better presenter, and you'll be in control of yourself, and then you also control the ride and the trip that you take your audience on. Which is why the next C is so important, because that C stands for consideration. Consideration. Preview your audience's demographics. Make sure that your vocabulary is appropriate for who you're speaking with. And I'll give you a cheat sheet tip on that, but let me also say, check recent news for the mood shift of the audience. For instance, you don't want to go in and speak to teachers about how great the teaching profession is, and then you didn't check the news and found out that specific district had a bunch of teachers laid off the day before. And I use that example because that's something that I actually know to have happened, where the speaker did not have that consideration and check what was going on in the audience's lives. They were already at the conference, and so they had to be there. So, just think about what you're saying. Have that consideration. Okay, and here's your cheat sheet for your vocabulary, checking if your vocabulary is important. Oh, okay, no, I went too fast for myself. Sometimes I got to look at my notes. See, that's another thing you want to do sometimes. Look at your notes. It's okay. It's okay to let people know that you slipped up. That's going to come in a later. C, it's called, recognize that you're human. And it's okay for you to make a mistake. I think it helps for your authenticity. I don't on purpose try to go out and make sure I make one mistake per engagement. But if I do, I don't mind refocusing and reshifting myself to let people know that I've got to reconnect to what I'm here to talk about, because getting the message to them is more important than me seeming like I'm a seamless presenter. So, again, that goes with your consideration. Your job is to deliver the message. And so that's what I want to make sure I'm doing. So make sure, you in your cheat sheet, you say to yourself, this is the type of audience that will or will not give me a standing ovation to let me know I've successfully reached them. They remind me of a time when, see, for instance, I created a suicide prevention awareness session for the Army. Now, that's not a session where everybody's going to run up to me afterwards and say, oh, man, you were great, thank you, I need that information, because there's still that stigma attached to it, where people, some people see them talking to the presenter, they may think, well, ooh, are they considering suicide? Or is there something going on in their life that I don't know about? And part of my session was about, taking that stigma away. And I have to say, I did the session, I did it at Natick Army Base in Natick, Massachusetts. And after both of my sessions, I'm really happy to say that I had at least 5 to 7, less than 10, but people come up to me afterward and thank me. Because the thing about suicide prevention awareness, remember, don't just decide that someone who wants to talk about an issue is dealing with the issue. Maybe they're getting information for someone else. You have to consider that. Everybody's not getting something for themselves. They're getting something for someone else, or they're getting information that will be useful for them in case they're involved in certain situations. And that might be a good motivation for you to go to certain sessions. Don't think that, oh, well, that thing doesn't interest me. I don't need to sit in on that session. I don't think I'll go to that conference. It would be a waste of my time or my money. No, go and learn something new that may be helpful in your life. Consideration. And also, when I talk about making sure that the vocabulary is appropriate, you want to know, what are the buzzwords in that age group, that gender, that neighborhood, but don't try to use them so that you can sound hip or condescending. Cheat sheet notes. Also, tell yourself: will you greet the people at the door? How will you open your speech? Will you open it with a poem, with a story, dangerously with a joke? Depends. And so you might say to yourself, I'll tell a story about. Then ask yourself, give yourself a note. I'll use a handheld mic. I prefer to use a lavalier. I'll sit. I'll stand. These are the types of things you need to consider. Caution. Caution. Coexist rather than compete with hecklers. Now, dealing with hecklers is a theoretical practice and commensurate with your experience and reputation. By that, what I mean is I can't define what you'd consider heckling. So therefore, I can't define a heckler or how you should handle them. For instance, if in my situation, if someone did something out of line where they considered themselves hecklers, I happen to have the gift and the habit of bringing everything that happens into the room into my presentation. So I might not necessarily feel heckled by somebody as much as I may think that their sense of humor or their comment really contributes to a point that I need to make. So don't just decide that someone is heckling you. Think about it. Also, in caution, it's about preparing for human error, which I mentioned before. If you lose your place or something, the key is not to give up on yourself, your audience, or your message. So, and this could be in consideration, but I'm putting it in caution because I want you to be careful of how you say what you say. You know, for instance, you want to tell yourself in a cheat sheet, this audience is feeling blank and needs to hear that blank. Okay? When I'm finished, hopefully they'll what? Do you have a call to action, or just want them to get the information, or just want them to even think about what you've presented? If it's your sales team or a group that you're involved with, how will you measure your impact? The blank in this audience probably want to hear about or can relate to. See, and now this is a tricky tip, because you don't want to find yourself putting people in a box and grouping them and being judgmental. Also, caution is about what I call overspeak or speech talk, and I mentioned this earlier. What are the buzzwords in this audience? Just be sure that you don't come off as condescending or patronizing, and I think that's worth repeating. So I know I got ahead of myself, and in fact you'll see that the C's don't necessarily come in order. They don't come in correct order, okay, or condescending order. They're going on throughout your presentation. So that's why your cheat sheet is going to be helpful for you. It helps you get in touch with who you are and your message well in advance. And so that takes us to the final C, which is continue. Continue. If you say something and people start to laugh, or they decide to applaud, and you can watch this in some of the political candidates, but wait for the audience laughter or applause to die down before you continue. Otherwise, if you cut them off and keep talking while they're laughing or applauding something that you said, even in a church where they're saying amen, what you've just done is controlled your audience and told them not to enjoy you, and that they are to sit there and listen to what you have to say. So they can't get emotionally involved when you say something. When they want to say, oh yes, they have to say, oh, I got to be quiet. I need to hear the next thing that he or she has to say. So it's so important that you continue by allowing your audience to enjoy you. And also in continue is what I mentioned earlier, is capitalizing on your miscues. If you trip up the stairs as you're going up to speak, can you talk about how we sometimes trip over our words when we have to speak, or when we're too excited to deliver our message, or to get somewhere we lose the balance in our lives? See, how can you bring that into your presentation? How can you continue to have an impact? Cheat sheet tips. I believe blank. See, what are your personal beliefs? And I think that will help the audience members feel blank. Again, not judgmental and putting them in the box, but come across of what do you believe? And that's something that you can continue to talk about. That way you won't have to really be, I may write a script sometimes for, my notes, but I'm not so tied to my notes, to where I have to read them I have to read them in this order. A lot of times we'll hear people say, well, when we come to that slide, if you believe what's on your slide, sometimes you can skip ahead and refer to the slide and let them know that when we get to that slide, it'll be more clear, but you can start speaking about that slide in advance. So again, allow your audience to enjoy you, and when you do, I hope you'll believe what I believe, that success is about confidence and listening. How people feel about themselves affects their ability to listen. And life is about going from one puzzle to the next. You're either a small, medium, or large piece in each puzzle. How you consider yourself as contributing to the bottom line depends on your envisioning yourself as an important piece of every puzzle in your life, based on how good you feel about yourself. It's what I call the top line. How I feel affects other people. And without it, there are no bottom line results, because how other people feel affects your business. Please subscribe to my channel and bring somebody else over to subscribe. As I get more technologically literate, right now I consider myself technologically functional, we're going to have a great time. Ciao.